It's week 14 of the NFL. We give you our 3 best bets for this Sunday, and it all starts right now. Hey guys, it's Matt from GrandstandBettors.com, and we have 3 best bets for week 14 in the NFL. We're going to get to that in just a moment, but first, make sure you go ahead and hit that subscribe button. You don't want to miss any of our free picks and predictions all season long. And while you're at it, smash that like button if you are ready for another fun-filled Sunday in the NFL. I know I am. So without further ado, let's dive in to week 14 and start with the Cleveland Browns and the Cincinnati Bengals in the 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. Bengals favored at 5.5 points at the moment. Over-under set at 46.5. Well, our Cleveland Browns, they come into this one 5-7 on the season, and talks of Deshaun Watson running the table and getting the Browns to the playoffs continue here in Cleveland. The reality of the situation is, though, that it's been one game for Watson and the Browns, and he didn't look good at all. I give him a D- when I was watching that game. It was a fantastic win last week, 27-14 over the Houston Texans, but it was all because of our defense. But again, let's not overreact. It was against the worst offense in the NFL with the Texans. We have been screaming, though, for the entire season that they need to run the football to win, and it seems like every time Kevin Stefanski listens to us, they do win. The Browns, as a team, ran for 174 yards last week on 38 carries, and on the season, they're a top 5 rushing team, averaging over 150 yards on the ground per game. This week, they go against a Bengals defense, and mediocrity is the name. They're middle of the road in rushing defense, middle of the road in passing defense, and you guessed it, middle of the road in scoring defense. But the last 2 times, or the last time they played this season at least, in Cleveland, they did give up the Bengals 32 points to the Browns. Speaking of the Bengals, though, that was a different team on Halloween night. Since then, they haven't lost, and they're averaging about 30 points per game. Joe Burrow and this offense are clicking. They have a legitimate shot to win the AFC North now, especially with Lamar Jackson going down. Burrow, after struggling out of the gate, has settled in very nicely. He's thrown for 3,500 yards and 25 touchdowns. Perine has now taken over at running back after Mixon went down with an injury a few weeks back and has looked fantastic. He rushed for over 100 yards last week. And when you add in that wide receiver core of Higgins, Jason Boyd, this offense should thrive this week against a mediocre secondary. So what is our best bet for this Battle of Ohio? Well, Stefanski and this Browns team has had the Bengals number recently. They've won the last 5 meetings against the Bengals, and each time it seems like they do it with a nice mixture of defense and rushing the football. However, this week, we have a quarterback in Watson who's going to want the ball in his hands, and we have a head coach in Stefanski that just can't be patient enough to stick with a consistent rushing attack. It was clear last week that Watson was a person who has not played football in nearly 2 years, and for anyone who thinks that he's going to flip a switch, especially after seeing the hesitation and inaccuracy against the Texans, you're nuts. Look for the Bengals to throw the football early and often to get out to a lead and force Stefanski to abandon the run and put the ball in the hands of Watson. We hate to say this, but Baker Mayfield may be laughing at us by the end of week 14 because with our first best bet of week 14, and we really honestly hate to do this, we're going to take the Cincinnati Bengals minus 5.5 over the Cleveland Browns. Now, with our second matchup of Week 14, we're going to take a look at the Jacksonville Jaguars versus the Tennessee Titans in the 1 p.m. Eastern time slot. The Titans are minus 3.5 point favorites at the moment. The over-under has dipped down to 40.5. The Jag season, like most of them, is coming into Week 14, and they have no sign of being in the playoffs again this season. But there have been flashes of progression for this team. Not last week against the Lions, where they lost 40-14, but overall, there has been a bright side with Lawrence at the helm. Lawrence has done a much better job this season limiting his turnovers, as he only has 6 interceptions on the season with 2,800 passing yards and 17 touchdowns. Travis Etienne has averaged 5.4 yards per carry, and their off-season pickup of Christian Kirk has excelled as the #1 target for Lawrence and will most likely end the season over 1,000 yards receiving. So, why are they just a 4-8 team on the season? It must be their defense, right? Well, not really. Yes, they don't have the best defense in the NFL in terms of yardage given up, but they are only giving up 22.7 points per game. Where they have lacked is being able to come through in the key moments. 6 of their games have been decided by 1 score or less, and if things just went their way a little bit more, who knows, maybe we're talking about a 6-6 or 7-5 Jags team. Let's remember, they are young, and being able to win close games does come with experience. So let's talk about a team that is 7-5. On the other side of the field, you have the Tennessee Titans. They have now lost 2 straight after that beat down against Philly last week, 35-10. Good news for the Titans is they play in the AFC South, and even after losing a couple of games, they still have a 3-game lead on this division. Tannehill definitely has taken a step back this season, but again, great news for the Titans. They have a guy named Derrick Henry that you can just hand the ball off anytime you want. He has over 1,000 yards rushing on the season and averages 4.3 yards per carry. Now, this week, Henry is certainly going to get touches, but Jacksonville does have an above-average rushing defense, and they have the 3rd worst secondary in the NFL. So look for Tannehill to utilize Henry a little more in the passing game, as well as 6 other wide receivers that have about 300 yards or more receiving for the Titans on the season. The name of the game passing this year for the Titans has been go big or go home, as they are top 10 in yards per catch, and they have 3 wide receivers averaging 18 yards per catch. Jacksonville, on the other hand, is 5th worst in yards per completion. So as much as you think Henry will run in this game, it looks a little more set up for Tannehill to sling the football around. So what is our best bet for this AFC South matchup? Well, the question is Tennessee the product of a bad division, or are they actually a contender in the AFC conference? Well, that's easy to answer. They're a product of a bad division. This season, the losses that the Titans have are against the Giants, Bills, Chiefs, Bengals, and Eagles. Those are all playoff-bound teams at the moment, and all their wins this season, the Titans, have come against bad teams, maybe with the exception of the Washington Commanders. The Titans are just a product of their schedule, and this week they're going to play another horrible team. A passing defense is bad, and again, just take advantage of being better on paper. So with our second best bet of NFL Week 14, we're going to take the Tennessee Titans -3.5 over the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, before we get to our final pick for Week 14 in the NFL, just a reminder, if you are looking for all of our plays, head on over to grandstandbettors.com, become part of our family, and start living that grandstand life. But we do have one more best bet for you here for Week 14 in the NFL, and it's going to be on Sunday Night Football between the Miami Dolphins and the LA Chargers. Dolphins at the moment, 3.5-point favorites. Over-under is at 53.5. Now, Miami Dolphins fan. Oh, the Miami Dolphins fans. This team, we told you last week, was going to lose to the 49ers because, as we know, Miami and Tua, they're frauds. Well, they not only lost to the 49ers last week, but they lost essentially to a third-string quarterback, because that's where Brock Purdy was coming into the season before Trey Lance and Jimmy G went down with injuries. Tua threw 2 picks, and as we mentioned, gets exposed pretty easily against better defenses in the league. Now, does he almost have 3,000 yards passing? Yes. Does he have a 4-to-1 TD to INT ratio? Yes. And does he have a 68% completion rate? Yes. But as we mentioned, he just feasts off horrible teams and defenses. Well, guess what, Miami Dolphins fans? Tua and this team gets this week to make you feel like they are a playoff and Super Bowl bound contender yet again. But the reality of the situation is they're just going to be going up against the 5th worst defense in the NFL and the 3rd worst scoring defense. But this week, it might benefit them to rush the football rather than try to throw to Tyreek Hill, as the Chargers, they are giving up 151 yards on the ground per game. game. On a quick side note, the one person that is really loving playing horrible teams this season is Tyreek Hill. He has about half of all the passing yards from Tua and has a real possibility of breaking Calvin Johnson's record in true form within week 17 of the season. But enough about the fraudulent Dolphins. The Chargers have now also crept into that category. They're coming off a loss to the Raiders last week, and if they fall to the Dolphins this week, then the AFC West as a whole has been the most overrated division of football ever coming into a season. Justin Herbert threw for 335 yards and a TD last week, and on the season has 3,400 yards and 3-to-1 TD to INT ratio. Justin Herbert has not been the issue on offense. Actually, to his credit, Mike Williams and Keenan Allen are constantly injured on this team. He's done a great job of utilizing almost every option on the field. What has been the problem for this team has been their rushing attack and their defense, which we alluded to. So what is going on with their rushing attack? Well, they're only averaging 84.7 yards per game on the ground, and as a team, they finally just went over the 1,000-yard mark on the season. They're second worst in the NFL in rushing yards. A lot of that, though, is because they don't rush the football. They're fourth worst in the NFL with just 22 attempts per game, and even though Austin Eckler has 7 rushing touchdowns, they just refuse to run the football with him. Instead, they throw almost 43 times a game, and that allows teams to sit back in the secondary and make it a living hell for Herbert. With Miami having a top 10 rushing defense, look for more and the same to happen again this week in Sunday Night Football. So, what is our best bet for these two fraudulent teams playing in LA this week? Well, even though the Dolphins should be run heavy this week against the Chargers, Tua is going to throw the football and Hill's going to get his. The Chargers, on the other hand, will not attempt to run the football at all, and they're just going to throw against a below-average secondary. This game should be very exciting to watch from the start to finish, and we should see almost 85 passes in this one, and it's going to be a back-and-forth shootout. So with our final best bet here of NFL Week 14, we're going to take the Miami Dolphins, LA Chargers, over 53.5 points. Well, that does it for us here at Grandstand Bettors. As always, sit back, relax, enjoy a fun-filled Sunday of NFL Week 14, and we'll see you right here on YouTube for Cleveland Browns, Cincinnati Bengals, live at 1 o'clock.